Kinda Murdery is sponsored by HellaDoge.com. That's HellaDoge.com. The only social media website that pays 80% of its profits out to real users in real Dogecoin just for doing what you do anyway. It's a blast on there, guys. Get out of the Facebook game. Get into the crypto game. HellaDoge.com. This is Kinda Murdery Insomniac. Stories to stay awake by. Good evening, sweet legion of the bloodshot eye. Tonight, I bring you a memory of Hawkin's Bar in Trinity County, California. This is a hideous saga of murderous misfortune and revenge gone terribly wrong. There's a lot happening right now, I know. And if your nerves are raw, I suggest that you step away. But if you'd care to join me on this tour of human darkness, then please do, as I share with you a story printed by the Fort Worth Star-Sunday Telegram on November 15th, 1992, 30 years ago. This is the tale of poor disabled Gary Summar, whose awkward gait earned him the nickname Hop. Gary was a longtime transient, universally liked by family, friends, and bartenders across the Emerald Triangle, from Arcata to Weaverville. Summar's life was hard, and it ended harder when, as a cover for their theft of his Social Security disability money, a gang of self-styled vigilantes, who were in truth little more than ruthless drug-addicted outcasts, accused Hop of pedophilia, and then took their revenge. The small disabled man was beaten mercilessly, horrifically tortured, and brutally killed by a team of bizarro avengers whose sadistic devilry made them nationally notorious, known across the country as the Hawkin's Bar 8. That's right, this small-statured, disabled man was beaten, tortured, and murdered by 8 adult humans. I wish that I could say that calling his killers human was a kindness they did not deserve, but in all my studies of humanity, I have learned that there's nothing quite so human as terrible violence and rage. When they found Gary Hop Summar's crumpled body up on the mountain, sheriff's deputies first thought that animals had been picking at it. A closer look revealed a more terrible truth. Summar had been stabbed more than 70 times before his short, bent body was dumped in the shallow grave where a woodcutter found it 4 days later. In the months that followed the discovery, 8 people, 5 men and 3 women, were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit the October 2, 1991 slaying that local newspapers described as a vigilante-type killing. Prosecutors say Summar, a 37-year-old wanderer with deformed legs and a limp, was killed in a horrifyingly vicious way by people who believed that he had molested the 5-year-old daughter of one of the defendants. These are the words of Special Prosecutor Robert Maloney. They did all they could to demean his body before he died. The victim apparently died while defendants were in the process of administering punishment. That was fortuitous for him as it shortened his suffering. Defense attorneys for the Hawkin's Bar 8, so named after the mountain town where Summar lived in a trailer park by the Trinity River, say that prosecutors do not really know who killed Summar, and are trying to pressure people to talk by charging so many. Said defense attorney Joanna Carell, "I think they believe there were a lot of people there drinking and instigating and encouraging. I don't think they know who did what, and they decided to charge as many as they can and see what shakes down." Now the defendants are sitting through a string of pretrial hearings in a red-walled 19th century courthouse where many of the lawyers wear cowboy boots, and the county's gold rush past is not entirely remote. For Trinity County, a sparsely populated slice of mountainous paradise between Eureka and Redding, The case is the first death penalty trial anyone can remember. The trial is also by far the most expensive ever conducted in the county. $500,000 so far, and climbing. The defendants make up 1/4 of the jail's population. When there are pretrial hearings, Superior Court Judge John Letton must respond to motions from 10 defense attorneys. In a county with a depressed logging industry, an unemployment rate close to 13%, and welfare rolls that include more than 1/7 of the population, the crime court's cost alone are cause for anger. The state has agreed to pick up the tab for the trial, but that does not mollify everyone. Instead of due process, some people would simply like to see the defendants strung up. "It's not like the city up here," said one logger at a Weaverville bar. "They're used to it down there. We're not. Nothing like that has ever happened up here." Years ago, he said, some folks would pick on some hippies and give 'em a bad time on a back road and maybe cut their hair or scare 'em away, but they never put anyone in a grave. In the postcard pretty town of Weaverville, where the pace of life is slow and the mountain air is crisp, many residents condemn the killing, saying that the defendants took the law into their own hands. "There is a place for eye for an eye justice," said one artist who knew Summar, but he added that Summar was innocent and too giving, and then he got tried, convicted, and stabbed by vigilantes. Anyone even remotely involved in this should hang. Summar did not grow up in Trinity County, but he had lived for years about 50 miles to the west in the coastal town of Arcata. About 2 years ago, he lived in a crash pad near Humboldt State University campus in Arcata. There, Summar met a man named Bernard "Bird" McCarley, then 29. McCarley had spent 10 years in the California prison system for an armed robbery conviction in Los Angeles County and another 6 months in Humboldt County jail for an assault. Acquaintances said that McCarley, with an intimidating dominant manner formed by years in prison, was a heavy drinker and a drug user who became angry when he used drugs. Summar, whose limp and colostomy bag were because of birth defects, had various friends he stayed with off and on. In the months before his death, he shared a trailer in Hawkin's bar with McCarley and McCarley's girlfriend, Barbara Adcock, who lived there with her 3 children. Their 2-bedroom trailer was set on a hill above the U.S. Forest Service campground where Summar, McCarley, Adcock, and others often spent hours partying and drinking under a thick canopy of walnut trees. The grove was a few hundred yards from the gurgling green-blue Trinity River. Adcock had lived in the area for years and had her own hard times. She scrounged the dump for aluminum cans to turn into money, and she brought back canned food that others had tossed in the dump. "I think her whole life was filled up with drinking and being on the wrong side of things," a former neighbor said. In the period just before Summar was killed, one of his friends, Robert Jones, who was camping down by the river, said that it was pretty obvious that Adcock wanted Summar out of the trailer. "She wanted the trailer for her, Bird McCarley, and the kids," said Jones, who will be one of the main witnesses for the prosecution in the upcoming trial. Some weeks before he died, Summar hitchhiked to Arcata and saw friend Lisa Kennedy. In the past, Summar talked glowingly about Hawkin's bar, the sunshine and the parties. This time it was not going so well. He said, "I'm having problems up there. I've got to clear some stuff up. And then I'm coming back down." Kennedy said he was really depressed about it. I could tell. Several days before the slaying, Adcock reported to the sheriff's deputies that Summar had sodomized her 5-year-old daughter, according to pretrial testimony by Sergeant Dan Kirchner, the main sheriff's investigator on the case. Kirchner and Adcock's lawyer, Steve Carlton, differ about what happened. Kirchner says a subsequent investigation turned up no evidence corroborating Adcock's accusation. But Carlton, a former Shasta County district attorney, says that Adcock took her daughter to a local clinic and was advised that there was evidence she was, in fact, molested. Whatever version is accurate, animosity towards Summar clearly increased among the people who hung out down by the river. Jones said that Summar kept coming around to try to convince people that he had not molested Adcock's daughter. Later, Jones said that another man in the campground told him he had seen Summar in the back of a red truck being driven out of the campground, and Jones and the man told him that Summar looked dead to him, or he wasn't far from being dead. His face looked all messed up. To recount what happened next, the prosecution will rely in part on one of Adcock's children, a 10-year-old boy who prosecutors say witnessed Summar's killing on a remote logging road about 5 miles from the campground where he was abducted. The boy, who is under the care of the county foster care officials, has identified McCarley and 3 of the other male defendants as those doing the actual killing, prosecutors say. They add that the other 4 people charged in the case, Adcock, 2 women and a man, participated in the conspiracy to carry out the slaying. For their part, defense attorneys make it clear that they will attack the boy's testimony, pointing out that he has given sharply varying versions of events. In all the legal wrangling, however, no one is disputing that Summar died a tortured death. What was done to Summar is coldly, clinically detailed in court documents filed by the prosecutors. One of Summar's ears was cut off. One of his eyes was gouged out. He was struck repeatedly in the genitals, and several of his bones were broken. When his body was found, his pockets were empty and had been turned inside out. Just the day before the killing, Summar had gone to the bank and withdrawn several $100s in disability check money. The issue in the courtroom will be who killed Summar, and the focus will be on the defendants. These are homeless, nomadic people of their own choosing, one source close to the defense team said, who declined to be named. They are not an organized gang, he added, but instead a group that partied, drank, and did drugs together down by the river. They had a common bond of not conforming to what society finds acceptable. Being societal misfits, they didn't know how to deal with this molestation accusation. So it's the old macho thing. It matters that they thought he was a molester. Then things built up, they got drunk and loaded, and this was a heinous murder. What led to it? That's the question. After an autopsy, Summar's body was cremated, and his ashes were sent to his mother in the Midwest. The mother told the coroner she heard from Summar once in a while, but she had not seen her son in 17 years. She added that he was, quote, a good Christian boy. Summar's friends say his killing is hard to reconcile with the man they knew, an inoffensive, gentle soul who made others happy. He loved his gin and tonics, beer, and marijuana, and he spent a lot of time in bars. There he would borrow small sums and pay back what he owed quickly. Describing his habits, friends flatly rejected the idea that Summar was a child molester. There wasn't a darn thing pretty about Hop, but his spirit just shined right through, said Donna Hammers, a bartender at Toby and Jack's Bar in Arcata, the Humboldt County town north of Eureka, where Summar lived on the street and in crash pads in recent years. He didn't have money, and he didn't have looks, he didn't have Jack, but he had such a positive attitude. We really loved Hoppy. He was a sweetie. As autumn takes hold of the mountains around Arcata, Summar's friends go up to Redwood Park on the edge of Humboldt State campus. There they have planted a spindly red alder in his memory. The tree is nestled up against some redwoods, looking a bit forlorn. At these gatherings, Summar's friends drink beer. They recall the candlelight vigil they held in the plaza in downtown Arcata after he died. About 100 people came. In this Insomniac's opinion, the testimony of family and friends, when joined with the timing of the beatings, torture, and murder, which occurred just a day after Summar had withdrawn hundreds of dollars from the bank, certainly seem to suggest that the charges of molestation were trumped up to cover the robbery of a disabled man's government money. But I suppose we'll never know the truth. The truth we do know resides in the court documents. One of Summar's ears was cut off. One of his eyes was gouged out. He was struck repeatedly in the genitals, and several of his bones were broken. When the body was found, the pockets were empty and had been turned inside out. Just the day before the killing, Summar had gone to the bank and withdrawn several $100s in disability check money. These truths remain. I'm your host, Zevon Odelberg, and you've been listening to Kinda Murdery Insomniac. Stories to stay awake by. Good night.
Kinda Murdery Insomniac is created, researched, edited, produced, and hosted by Zevon Odelberg, with opening theme by Niall Madden and art by the Gin of Lang. Available now on all podcasting platforms. If you like the show, please subscribe, review, and tell your friends. You can find us on social media at Kinda Murdery or email at kindamurdery@gmail.com.